We are live on Standing for Truth tonight, and we are debating creation versus evolution. I'm really excited here. The more specific topic, though, is common design versus universal common ancestry, guys. Before we get started, if everybody is enjoying these debates and discussions and just the content on this channel, please like and subscribe. That'd be awesome. So let's get to the fun. Let's get the party started. I'd like to thank both the debaters, Adam here and Dr. Ken Hovind, for giving us their time for today's debate. We know the one thing we all could use more of is time, that's for sure. So I'm going to hand it over to Nephilim Free here. He's going to be tracking the time, and he's going to go over the format real quick and give us the rundown. Thanks, guys, and go ahead there, Neph.
Okay, so the format for this debate is 5-minute opening statements. Then each opponent will give a 4-minute rebuttal. Then there'll be a 30-minute discussion session, and then 3-minute closings and 6 to 10-minute question and answer session. So who is starting the debate? Did anybody decide, or should I flip a mental coin?
Adam.
Adam is going first. Okay,
Yes.
Adam, if you're ready, whenever you're ready, you begin speaking, and I'll start the timer. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Right, just going to put my slideshow on full screen. Hello, everybody. Can you all see my screen, my PowerPoint? Yeah?
Yes,
Everyone
I see it.
That's fine. Okay. So, can you see it, Kent? Can you see my screen?
I can see it.
Ah, lovely. Right, so my name is Adam. I own a gaming channel here on YouTube. This is not the sort of thing I usually do, but Standing for Truth sent me a message and dragged me along to this. Not kicking and screaming, thankfully. I came along willingly. I am joined here by Dwayne Johnson, Donald Trump, and Delboy, and I'm going to run through this argument with you: common design versus common designer. Kent is arguing for common designer. I'm arguing for, well, not entirely common design. We're going to get into that. So, evolution. It requires common design. It also requires uncommon design, and I'll explain that fully. So let's look at some common designs first. What do we have here? We have a human hand. So you've got your thumb, you've got your 4 fingers. That equals 5 digits on the human hand. We've got a dog's paw. We again have 5 digits. You've got the 4 toes. You also have the dew claw, which is that one slightly behind, just above the I forget the name of the bit below. My apologies. So 5 digits there again. This is a lizard, one of the reptiles, and it too has 5 digits.
I hate to interrupt, but Adam, if you think your screens are changing, they're not. I just thought I'd point that out. There might be a technical issue. Now they are, it seems like. Okay, I'll be quiet. I'm going to give you about 15 more seconds. Just wanted to let you know the screen was not changing. Okay, go ahead. Okay,
so that's your dog paw there. This is your lizard. So 5 digits there. Now, next one. Now, that is a chameleon's foot. What do we notice about the chameleon's foot? It has 2 toes, and yet it has 5 claws. Now, how do we explain this looking at it from an evolutionary point of view? Well, let's look at the skeletal structure of the chameleon. You see there on each foot, it has 5 toes. 2 toes. Now, how do we explain this? The ancestors of the chameleon were, well, your more common lizards, really. It had the 5 digits like it does here. But it adapted to live as an arboreal creature. So it grabs onto twigs, onto branches. And it adapted to develop these almost pincer-like toes that don't act like your normal digits do. And yet it retains these 5. You just see there at the bottom of the pencil, it's got 2 toes on one side and 3 on the other, but they're all melded together. Not the bones, but the skin around it. And they can't really move them independently. Skinks. These are all skinks that you see on the picture here. So you've got the blue-tongued skink at the top, which has the 4 legs. And then at the bottom right-hand corner, you've got another type of skink, which is entirely legless. In the midst of these 2, you've got 3 more skinks with varying levels of legness, if you want to use that as a word. So the one in the middle has got extremely reduced limbs to the point where they almost don't exist. They hardly use them. They've got long bodies that they move like a snake, and they have these tiny little limbs that don't really do much, to be honest. And these are all skinks. They all have a very similar lifestyle. They're burrowing animals, which is why they've eventually lost these legs, because legs are more of a hindrance than anything when you're trying to dig underground. So there you have a common design. So you've got the skinks, but you've got an uncommon design. And we're going to explain that evolutionarily, if that's a word again. Right, so snakes. Boas and pythons are rather special among the snakes because they have what are called pelvic spurs. These claws that you see up here. It looks like a Burmese python on the top. It looks like another python below. And on the right-hand side, you can see the bone structure. You can see the actual pelvic bones down there. Now, the claws, they have a purpose in mating. But the bones within there don't do anything. They float freely in the muscle mass. They're just there as remnants. And this is uncommon among the snakes. It's only common between two of them. Why is it not in all of the snakes? Why is it in none of the snakes? Well, evolution can explain that. Here are some common and uncommon designs again.
30 seconds.
Thank you. Common and common at the same time. You've got very common leg structures in terms of bones, but they fulfill different functions and they are in entirely different skins, as it were. So you've got fins on the left, feet on the right-hand side. I'm going to rush through these last bits. Is that my time? I heard a bell ringing.
Yeah, 15 seconds.
I'll finish it there. I can go over the rest of this stuff later if you wish. I'll pass my time over.
All right, Dr. Hovind will go next. Dr. Hovind, when you begin speaking, 5 minutes, sir.
Yes, well, thank you. Good to be here. My name's Kent Hovind. I was a high school science and math teacher 15 years, moved to Pensacola, Florida in 1989 and began the ministry of creation science evangelism. I take the position that the Bible is true and scientifically accurate. The Bible 20 times in the first 7 chapters says the animals will bring forth after their kind. That's all we've ever seen. And everything Adam showed today is the same kind of animal. Might be variations within that kind, but still, he hasn't shown the evidence for evolution that I could see. So we're building a Christian camp in Lenox, Alabama, Dinosaur Adventure Land. Come on down and see us. Our website is drdino.com. Get the commercial in there. I think the evidence is overwhelming. There's a common designer. Did you know the lug nuts from a Honda Accord will fit on a Honda Prelude? You can go try it. Unscrew the lug nuts. They'll fit right on. That proves they both evolved from a skateboard 14.729 million years ago. That's the kind of fuzzy logic Adam is using. Because there are similarities between creatures, therefore they must have a common ancestor. Well, that's ludicrous. I think the reason the lug nuts on a Honda Accord will fit on a Honda Prelude is because they're both made by the same people, Honda. I think you'll find thousands of similarities between all the different types of cars. Nearly all the cars in America, the steering wheel is on the left side. And in Britain, they're on the right side. But what does that prove? Well, that's the way they drive over there. That's the way they design the car. So if there are similarities between the Chevy and the Ford and the Honda over here, that might prove that because they're designed to drive on the roads over here in America. So to use evidence that he's showing, pointing out similarities, 5 toes on all these creatures, well, yeah, that's the same designer designed them all. I don't think he has a clue about the chameleon and how he flexes his muscles and uses his 5 toes to feel the branch. And what if he hurts one of them? What if he only had 2 and stubbed his toe or broke it or something? Well, he could still function just fine. Redundancy. Why do most of the cars carry a spare tire? Well, in case you get a flat. This is common sense 101. So to say that because they look similar in somebody's mind, therefore they must be related is ludicrous. That wouldn't hold up 2 seconds in an honest court of law. We do see 5 claws, 5 fingers on many creatures. I'm surprised that he mentioned about the python and the pelvic leg bones. First place, Adam, going from having legs to not having legs would be losing, not gaining. All the evidence I've ever seen evolutionists give are things like this, where they think something is losing something. Why don't you see it gaining? Same thing with the Sphinx. You said burrowing in the ground, legs would be a hindrance. Okay, well, they all burrow in the ground and some have legs. Apparently they need them for something we don't know about, or maybe somebody does know about it and I just don't happen to know. So the fact that I think there's an amazing design. And to look at, one year Porsche built a car, accidentally built it, if my understanding is right, that you could not change the spark plugs without removing the motor from the frame. You had to take the motor out of the car to change the spark plugs. Well, that was a poor design, but it doesn't mean it wasn't designed. Okay, I don't think there's any poor design in God's nature any place, but if we don't understand why he designed something the way he did, that doesn't prove he didn't design it. I think that's a silly argument for evolution, to say this is poor design, therefore it happened by chance. I could look at the Porsche and say, look at that poor design, therefore nobody made the Porsche, which would be silly. Of course somebody made it. They made a goof. I happen to believe, and I'll tell you, I do not believe God made any goofs. I think we need to study. Back in 1905, I think was the date, they listed in the encyclopedia 180 vestigial organs that the human body has. They said, you don't need your appendix, you don't need your tonsils, you don't need your adenoids, and they went on and on and on listing these vestigial structures. Well, the problem was not that they're vestigial. The problem was they didn't understand the function of them yet. There are none, zero, nada, no vestigial structures anywhere. And the snake does not have vestigial legs, and those bones are not floating freely in the snake's body. Those bones and those claws are used in the python for mating. Snakes can't talk. They can't say, scoot over, honey. They don't have any arms. That's how the snake, you can watch them when they mate. They'll use those claws and the bones internally to maneuver the female into position so they can mate with them. Has nothing whatsoever to do with walking on land. But again, I'd point out clearly this, even if it was true, this is losing, not gaining. Where are the examples of any animal or plant gaining a new feature, a new structure, not a new use of an existing structure? I have used a crescent wrench a couple of times for a hammer. Okay. That's all I had available. And so sometimes animals or plants may have to use some of their existing structures for a heretofore unused job that they have to do. But that's not evolution. That's silly to call that evidence for evolution. Go ahead.
Okay, so now it's Adam's turn for a 4-minute rebuttal. Adam, when you begin speaking, 4 minutes, sir.
Oh, Adam, I think you're on mute. You got to unmute yourself, brother.
My apologies. Saying thank you, Ken. It's good to speak to you. Obviously, our first time speaking. It's a pleasure, mate. And I hope we can have some more fun as we go along in this.
Sure.
I'm going to skip this bit for now because you mentioned Hondas, didn't you? And funnily enough, here is one now. This is the devil car, the Honda Jazz. I can't stand the things. And this was obviously designed by a person. So was this Honda Jazz. Now, you'd say it was designed by the same person. It's got the same logo. It's got all the same bits. Really, we should be calling this the Honda debate, if we could please, standing for truth. We've got another Honda here. This, again, is a Honda Jazz. You could say, yeah, it's got all the hallmarks of a Honda, and you'd expect it to be made by the same person. But then what about that? Now, looking at that, and looking at those 3 Honda Jazzes there, are you going to turn around to me and say, well, they must have had the same designer because they've all got wheels? Well, clearly they weren't made by the same designer. That tank is not a Honda, especially not a Honda Jazz. I imagine it moves at more than 10 miles an hour. Let's look at nature. There's a fish. There's another fish. And there's a fish. You could say, oh, they've all got commonality, so why weren't they made by a common designer? Okay. There's your octopus. We're one of the most alien-looking things on the planet. So if you're not going to say the tank was made by the same people that made the Honda, then why would you say that all animals and plant life had a common designer when there are such different designs? Right, what else did I put? You mentioned that there are goofs in these animals. Now let me ask you this. I imagine you're talking from the point of view of God creating all these animals and such. Well, if that were the case, why would there be goofs? Why would there be animals at all? Because all throughout history, all throughout the fossil record, what do we see? We see trial and error in much the same way that cars went through trial and error. Do you think that if they made the perfect car to start with, they would need more than one? No, cars started with, I believe it was maybe the Ford. Those were one of the first types of car. But over time, we found errors with it. We found problems. And each time we've done trial and error to make the better car design. And cars have forever been adapting, getting better, because the previous ones weren't up to scratch. Some of them are, and they last a long time, like the Mini over here in Britain. It was around in the 60s. Most cars from the 60s aren't here anymore, but the Mini is still here with us because it has adapted to the British lifestyle. You mentioned snakes using the claws in mating. Well, why don't all snakes use them in mating then? Why is it not a common design? Why is it only certain snakes have it? Why is it not all of them have it, or none of them have it? Because they all mate in the same way, essentially. New features. What about spitting in cobras? Where you've got basal cobras don't have the ability to spit. This is a study that was done, and you look at ones like pseudo-Goldii, which is near the bottom there, which is one of the more basal cobras. It doesn't have the ability to spit. And neither do the ones below that, so your Walterenesia aegyptia, your false cobra, they can't spit. And yet 3 groups have evolved this ability independently, these unique features, this ability to spit. And they don't spit the same either, they spit differently. If it was something commonly made, why wouldn't they all have the same spit? Why is it as well that, unlike vipers, cobras can't move their fangs? Both have fangs. The vipers have fangs and the cobras have fangs, but they both use them differently. One of them moves and one of them doesn't. Why are we not seeing a common design? Why are we not seeing snakes all looking like Honda Jazzes, having the same features, the same functions, the same inability to go over 20 miles an hour? Why are we not seeing that? You mentioned after kind. Well, let's go to how much time have I got left, Neff?
All right, that's time.
Yeah, leave it there.
So now we're going to have a 4-minute rebuttal from Dr. Hovind. When you begin speaking, sir, 4 minutes.
Well, thank you. Very interesting bit of argument. If you think that is evidence that we all came from an amoeba, I think you're really seriously needing some help. Let me answer a few of these. You showed 3 cars and a tank. I think you will see that all of them are have the same. They're meeting a basic need of moving somebody to a new location. So they probably have a driver's seat or passenger seats, maybe even. They probably have some method of moving, like wheels. They probably have a reason for wanting to move, like to be in a different location, like the car or the tank. So it's a design feature that works. Honda could probably start building tanks if they wanted. Honda could build airplanes if they wanted. I have built cars, I have built dune buggies, I have built decks, I've built houses, I have written books. I'm only one person. I think if God can design a fish and an octopus and a whale and a cell and a plant and 1,000 varieties of apples, I think that's proof of a really intelligent God, not proof of a common ancestor, proof of a common designer. I think you've made my case for me. Thank you very much. He said, why did the designer make such incredible variety? To me, that's to prove he can do it. Why did he make some snakes to spit and some not to spit? I don't know. I haven't studied that. That'd be a question for a herpetologist. Is there a reason? But to say that some can spit and some can't, therefore, all snakes came from a rock 4.6 billion years ago is ludicrous at many levels. I'd be willing to bet $1,000 or euros or whatever you use over there that snakes, when they have babies, the babies turn out to be snakes every time. And you mentioned about the cars. It's interesting to use that as an example, because when I do, the evolutionists jump on it right away and say, well, cars don't reproduce. Somebody produces them. Bingo, somebody produced the cars, and they produced with a wide range. I understand you can get a Honda with 2 doors, or a Honda with 4 doors, or a Honda with 5 doors. Honda probably makes a truck, too. I'm not sure what all they make. But it's coming from a mind of a person who wants to move somebody from one location to another and accomplish a function. If it's a truck, they might want to have the ability to carry some stuff in the back of the truck. So I think you'll find everything about the Honda is designed. Now, it's made of natural materials, most of it, iron mostly, but that doesn't mean it made itself. And plants and humans and animals are made of naturally occurring materials, the 92 elements found in the earth, but that doesn't mean they made themselves. Cars don't make themselves. Somebody makes them from the naturally occurring elements. So they dig the iron out of the ground and melt it down and make iron or steel and mix carbon with it, and then they make cars. Yeah, that takes intelligence to do that. It took intelligence for the 92 elements found in the earth to be created and shaped into the plants and the animals, and finally to humans, were the last thing God created. So you said the mini has adapted to British lifestyle. Adam, stop and think about that for 5 minutes. You mean the mini did this on its own? Or did you have some intelligent or semi-intelligent Brits over there try to manufacture a better mini every time? My uncle had one back in the early 60s, one of the early ones. I'd be willing to bet there are hundreds of improvements on the mini in the last 50 years. Get a 1960 and compare it to the 2020, 2019, a mini. Sure, there's improvements. That's because some intelligent people are driving it around saying, it really ought to have this. So they change it. The mini does not change itself. This is silly that somebody's changing it. And all the changes within the animals adapting to their environment are within very strict limits. You can get dogs that adapt to cold weather and dogs that adapt to warm weather, but you're never going to get a dog that can jump to the moon or fly. There are animals that can fly, but you're never going to get a dog to do that. It's not in the gene code. So sure, animals adapt to their environment, but that's because they're selecting a slice of an already existing gene code. That's not evolution. I suspect my time is up.
That's 4 minutes. Okay, so now we'll have a 30-minute discussion period whereby these two gentlemen will go back and forth with each other discussing the subject of common design or common evolutionary process. So I'll try to stay out of it as much as possible. You guys go ahead. 30 minutes.
Adam, tell me about the mini. Did it do it to itself?
Tell you about, sorry, I didn't hear that.
The mini, did the mini make these adaptations by itself?
Oh, I think you misunderstood my point with the minis. When I said it had adapted to the British lifestyle, it's probably the wrong use of words. What I meant is it's maintained, because you hear a lot of creationists say that various animals have been around for a long time, whereas some seem quite recent. My point with that is the mini from the 50s and 60s is still around in its current form. My best friend has one in its current form. That was the point I was getting across.
I'm so sorry to jump in here. Adam, did you want to, I think you were still sharing screen from your slides. Did you want to put your main logo on? And
I was going to use I was going to go over a couple of things in the slides, if that's all right.
Just for the discussion period. Yeah, if you want to go through a few things, but we're just trying to keep it a free-flowing kind of organic dialogue. Yeah. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. But that was my point in that one, Ken. Sorry if I didn't make that clear enough.
No, I think it was what's called a Freudian slip. It was perfectly clear. The mini was designed, and I agree. I think, and the fact that they didn't have to improve it much proves that the first guy did it pretty good. And I think the fact that the original dogs are still producing dogs 6,000 is evidence of a really good initial design. Do you have any examples of any animal ever producing something other than its kind?
Kind. Forgive me, I don't really understand what you mean by kind.
Well, if the Bible says if they're able to reproduce, at least initially, they were the same kind. They might have diversified now to where they can no longer reproduce like the Alaska rabbits and Florida rabbits. But I think most 5-year-olds could tell you that a rabbit is not the same kind as a watermelon.
So your definition of kind is something that can reproduce, but they might not be able to reproduce down the line. Well,
they initially could reproduce, and there may be diversities that have happened over the years. They may have adapted to an environment that has caused them to no longer be able to reproduce, like the ring species. They take the salamanders and go around, the central part of California, and the extremes can no longer mate. But they're obviously still a salamander. A 5-year-old will tell you that. It's a salamander. Do you have any examples of any animal ever producing something that any honest person would consider a different kind? What is your best example of any plant or animal producing offspring that are fundamentally different kinds of creatures?
Well, if you look at ancient snakes, I've got a picture of I believe it's Najash, or that might be Problematicus. But there's a picture of an ancient snake, and you've got fossils where you see that it's got leg bones. It's also got the skull of a snake. Snakes are very distinctive skulls. Now, you don't get snakes with legs like that today, not at all. How would you explain that in your point of view?
Well, I think in an honest court of law, somebody could point out, Your Honor, he doesn't know that this fossil he's showing had any children at all. You certainly don't know it had children that were different. And why are you thinking an animal long ago and far away that you found in the dirt can do something no animal today can do? No animal today can produce anything other than its kind. So this might be an example of extinction. There may have been a snake that had some type of limbs like that, and it's now extinct. You don't know that this is intermediate between anything. You don't know it had any kids at all. You don't know it had any kids that lived, and you don't know it had any kids that reproduced, that lived, that reproduced. And if this one is indeed an intermediary, who did it marry? Don't you have to have two at the same time in the same place of the opposite sex? You got a whole long list of problems, Adam. You're assuming, you're believing, SpongeBob style, that this is somehow an intermediate because it has little legs, appears to be legs. I don't know what it is. Is it a forgery? Certainly many fossils have been forgeries to try to prove the evolution theory. Study the history of that. Is it an extinct species? You don't know that this is the ancestor of anybody. You couldn't prove that in an honest court of law, at least.
I'm a little confused. You said you don't know if it had kids. Is that what you said about the problematicus of the picture I just showed?
Well, if you find any fossil anywhere, really all you could prove is it died. How could you prove that one had any children that lived? Tell me how you would prove such a thing.
Well, you wouldn't need to prove that specific one. You'd accept that if there's a fossil of a certain animal, that there was a population of that animal?
Well, would you agree that in a court of law they would say, objection, Your Honor, he doesn't know that? If there's a population of animals and one evolves a special trait, do they all evolve this special trait at the same time? There are billions of cows or millions of cows in the world. If they were going to try to evolve a trait, did all of them have to get it at the same time?
So you're saying, sorry, carry on.
Does one of them get this new special trait and the rest have to die off? This is Adolf Hitler 101. Let's get the superior race and kill off the rest to speed up the process. Evolution, whether you realize it or not, is based upon death being the hero. If this is indeed a superior snake, why are there still snakes today with no legs?
Well, it wasn't a superior snake. As I mentioned with the skinks, the whole reason they're losing their legs is because they're burrowing. What I don't understand, going back, is you said that it wouldn't stand up in a court of law to say that there must have been more than one of these animals alive at one time. Because this animal is there, it's obvious that there's a population of animals like this. That's without exception at all throughout the animal kingdom. I don't understand how that wouldn't stand up in a court of law to say that there were more than just one of a certain animal.
You couldn't prove any such thing. If your evolution theory is true, your whole theory relies on one of them getting a special trait, either by mutations or something, and that trait getting passed on to the next generation.
So you're saying that
over the population of snakes or whatever it is, or skinks or whatever. So your whole theory relies on there being one of them getting this trait and then passing that on to others. Evolution doesn't happen in the present. Science is things we can observe, study, and test and demonstrate. We can observe snakes having baby snakes and skink having baby skinks. We cannot observe any animal having a trait that is new, adds a new feature that is passed on. Nobody's ever seen this. It only happens long ago and far away in fairy tale land. Evolution is a fairy tale for grown-ups. That's all it is.
How about the spitting cobras example that I showed you then, which is numerous times in the cobra lineage, the spitting ability evolving separately because they're not the same spitting ability, that they operate slightly differently.
Why do you say the spitting ability evolved? Why can't you say they were designed to have different design? There are different types of creatures that fly. There are insects that fly. There are birds that fly. There are mammals that fly. There are fishes. Why can't we say the same designer decided, hey, I'm going to give each one of these the ability to fly? There are no cows that fly, no giraffes that fly, no people that fly. If we're the highest evolved creature with the highest IQ on the planet, why don't we be? I'd like to be able to fly, save a lot of time to get places quicker. I think it'd be pretty cool. So if there are snakes, you say, you use the word, I'm sure deliberately, they evolved the ability. You don't know that. They might have been created with that ability. And for the creator to make 5 different types of animals that can fly, and for him to make 3 different types of snakes that can spit, I don't see a problem with that. I think you'll find I bet Honda makes cars with the steering wheel on the right side to drive in Europe, in England. And they make some with the steering wheel on the left side to drive in America. You guys do it wrong, by the way. But
well, we could disagree about that in a different debate if you'd like. Why
that's design, not common ancestor.
Why? Let's look at spitting specifically then. Say you make your Honda Jazzes and somebody invents the sat nav. Everyone loves the sat nav. It's a great little invention, and it's really helpful. Why would God give three types of Honda Jazz the sat nav, and not give it to any of the other Honda Jazzes, even though he's got infinite resources, infinite whatever? Why doesn't he give it to all of them? This advantageous ability. And why does he make it these specific ones?
I guess I don't know what a SATNA is. What are you talking about?
Oh, sat nav, satellite navigation. You little.
Satellite navigation, sat nav. Okay. Why did Honda give it to some and not to others? Well, probably it would cost something to put that in the vehicle. Well, even if the cost is minimal, if it costs $50 to add that to a car, they may make.
Without cost. I said without cost because God wouldn't have those limitations.
Sure. If you're arguing again from poor design as evidence for no design, which is ludicrous. Take the Porsche that had a poor design. Okay, it doesn't mean there's no design. I don't know why some of them put that in them, some don't. That's maybe you don't need it in some countries. There probably is no place to navigate with by satellite in some parts of the world. Not available there. But again, that would be an argument from ignorance rather than argument for evidence for no designer at all. I think the fact that Honda puts this, navigation systems in some of their cars, the navigation system itself is phenomenally complex. Could not possibly happen by an explosion in an electronics factory. And the Honda's not adding this to itself. God can design anything he wants any way he wants. And we are looking at people today and animals today that are a copy off a copy off a copy off a copy off a copy of the original. It's amazing we can still sit and think and talk. So I think the fact that we're able to move at all is evidence of an incredible first generation copy of Adam. And we have degraded since then. Average person now has 3,500 defective genes, just like my old van out here with 316,000 miles. Well, it ain't what it used to be when it was brand new, but hey, it still works. It's not too bad. And so for the designer to make an original creation with a gene code that can be passed on hundreds, if not thousands of generations and still be working at all. Tell you what, get a computer code, any code, get Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint, make a copy of it onto a disk. Then make a copy of the copy. Then make a copy of the copy of the copy. Do that for 500 generations and tell me if it'll still run. It won't. It'll corrupt. The fact that we're having this conversation at all, even if we have a few genetic flaws inherited over the years, is evidence of a common designer, not a common ancestor.
So if we can take a closer look at this, where would you, I mean, obviously you're saying that various different types of Cobra were created, as it were. Where would those created ones be on this this table here, this diagram? Because you got the spitting groups up here, with the most basal group being Naya Atra. Would it be around there where it says 95? Those are essentially, well, for want of a better word, probabilities of the relationship. This was a phylogenetic study which showed the relatedness between these cobras. Do you doubt that, by the way? Do you doubt this study, that all these cobras were related?
I'm curious why you have lines on your paper at all. You don't know, no animal today, no cobra today produces anything but a cobra. You don't know that they're connected in any way with these lines. See, all these lines is back in what's called fairy tale land, long ago and far away. No cobra today produces anything other than a cobra. None. Zero. Just because somebody drew lines on paper, that's not science. Even if they have genetic similarities, that's not proof of a common ancestor. The Honda Prelude and my Chevy van have 5 lug nuts. Okay, maybe the Honda's got 4. I don't know. But it doesn't prove they both came from a skateboard. It proves that's a design that works. It's a common theme. When Ford first started making cars, people said, wow, this is pretty cool. Let's put an engine in here that'll run off gasoline or diesel fuel. Those are the 2 basic types of cars. It's a theme people have run with and tweaked and improved over the last 150 years and 130 years. And have made some great improvements. I'm glad I don't drive a Model T that you got to crank up in the morning and have hard tires that are going to break when they get cold and hit the bumps. I'm glad good people need it.
The difference between cars and cobras is you can't do a phylogenetic tree for cars like this. This was done in a laboratory under pretty strict conditions using 5 different genes, and they got this tree out of it. It's pretty in depth. It's pretty solid. A couple of species might be interchangeable here or there, But this shows the relatedness. It shows that these animals are all related and by what degree they're related. At the very bottom, you've got some vipers, the very 4 bottom ones, and you can see that they're very distantly related. They're an outgroup, whereas all these cobras are pretty clearly related. And we use these same techniques by using these genes to test animals all across the animal kingdom, and we get very similar results. I mean, look at the seals. They're a type of canid. How do we know that? Well, we've tested them genetically. We've also looked at morphological features. Why is it that morphology and genetics both produce almost exactly the same result each time? And why do we get it to such accuracy as well? If they were created, then why is this picture here not 4? You say that these cobras were made separately. I don't know. You haven't told me which ones were made separate to the others. I'd like to know that, by the way. But it's quite obvious from this graph that if they are all related, then spitting has evolved independently 3 times. I don't know how you explain that.
Well, you are assuming spitting evolved at all. And to say it evolved,
it did.
No, it did not. They were created to do what they do. Just the spitting ability is very complex. It involves some type of salivary gland.
Mm-hmm.
It involves some type of muscles to eject the spittle out. It's a very complex mechanism. Just spitting is a complex mechanism. And you said this shows relationship. Adam, I don't know who taught you that, but get your money back. It doesn't show any such thing. It shows somebody can draw lines on paper and connect them. That's all it shows.
Are you saying that somebody just drew those lines on the paper?
I'm saying you don't know any of those animals are related to any other animals. You don't know because today, none of them produce anything other than their kind. Why is it going backwards? They could. Like if we are really related to the whale through a common ancestor like an amoeba, at some point, somewhere way back long ago, the amoeba was able to produce something that was non-amoeba. And you've got all these snakes drawn back to a common ancestor. This is nothing but lines on paper.
I'm very confused that you say that these are lines on paper. I wonder why you say that.
Because I can see them where I'm sitting there, lines, well, maybe lines on a computer. You don't know that any of those snakes are related to any of those other snakes.
I do.
In an honest court of law, all you could prove is spitting cobras have babies that turn out to be spitting cobras. Now, some may lose the ability to spit. Oh, okay. Well, again, that's a losing, not gaining. But you don't know that any of those cobra varieties are related to any others. It could be. Is the Honda Prelude related to the Honda Accord? Or are they both coming from the designer?
Can you tell me how you think that these are just lines on paper?
Today, pick any one of those snakes on that chart. Any one of them. When they have babies, what will they be? Will they be straight line to the right, or will they jump to a new category?
It might diverge into 2. Or diverge into 2, sorry.
Well, you have, what, I don't know, I want to count them. Say you've got 30 different snakes there. Could there sometime in the future be 40 different snakes because they've diversified? Yeah. Possibly. That's creating a new category that somebody decided to put it in a new category. Maybe this snake has, different features, different color scales on his eyes or something. But you don't know going backwards in the past that these were related. See, science deals with things we can observe, study, and test. This is not science at all. This is lines on paper. This is imagination. This is SpongeBob. This is fairy tale.
Do you know the process of how these are made?
None of them can be proven in a court of law. You don't know that they're related because they have similar chromosome. Microsoft Word and Microsoft PowerPoint share thousands of identical lines of code. Identical.
So do you know the process by how these phylogenetic trees are created?
Yes, I know the process by which they put the lines on paper and what they try to look for.
Are you saying this is fraudulent?
Similarities between any number of things and draw lines on paper.
Are you saying this is fraudulent?
What's that?
Are you saying this is fraudulent?
No, I'm saying it's imagination. They don't know. Even if it's true, it's not science. You can't prove it. That's just lines on paper. You don't know that.
This is probably the worst time to tell you. This is my paper. I made this phylogenetic tree. I did this study. I can tell you for a fact that this is not simply lines of paper. This took a year of research, study, and analysis of DNA. This isn't me just drawing lines on paper. I'm actually quite offended that you've just That sounds like you're accusing me of fraud.
Well, do you have a delete key? I would delete all those lines. If it's interesting that you've discovered a lot of different varieties of cobras, that's good research. But it doesn't prove they're related to anything. You can't prove any of those lines belong there. Show me
I can show you all the PCR amplification pictures. I can show you all the work that I've done.
Well, the red category, I can't read it from here, but the ones that have the red line in front of them, you think they're ultimately related to the ones that have the yellow lines in front of them.
Yeah.
Do any of the snakes that have the yellow lines, and I can't read the names from here, do any of them ever produce anything other than the same kind of snake?
Well, would you consider a species a different kind?
I think you started with the assumption evolution has happened. Now let's look for the evidence. Why don't you start with the assumption these animals were created? Let's see which ideas the same creator used in all these different animals. Maybe he used a similar idea. Maybe the Porsche now finally puts a cup holder in their cars. I don't know.
But okay, so say we take that example, and we make these phylogenetic trees of all these animals. They all join like this. At what point do we cut it off and say, right, actually, no, those ones aren't related phylogenetically. We have to get rid of those lines because we think that that's where it starts. Where do we put that line?
I would go to the left of each one of the names and draw a line straight down and say everything to the left of this line is imagination, unprovable. Everything to the right of the line is probably science, observable. The cobra is going to produce baby cobras. We don't know that this is related to anything else. And I'm sorry you spent a year on this. A lot of people have done these kind of charts. I mean, you're not the first. Thousands of people have made charts like this. But it is indeed, Adam, nothing but lines on paper. This is not science. This is
I went through the arduous process of all these species that you see on here. I had scale and blood samples for. And I went through the process of extracting or cutting tiny bits of these scales or using tiny bits of these blood samples and mixing them with buffer chemicals, these chemicals that are used in amplification, putting them through a PCR analysis, which uses electromagnetics to move them up. I could show you the pictures. I could show you the pictures of the unsuccessful ones that they didn't amplify. And I got them analyzed. I cut... You get these big, massive maps on Mega 5 where you have all these DNA sequences, all the A, C, T, G, and they line up, and you see where they line up, and you can start to see, right, that one looks like it's a little less similar, and then you make these phylogenetic trees out of that, which is parsimonious, and this tree was made out of 5 different genes, and they all came to this phylogenetic tree, and you can see how likely the majority of these relationships are. I don't see how you can see that that's just lines on paper that I apparently have just made up. I think that's you accusing me of fraud.
Well, I don't know if you did fraudulent or not. Maybe it's just misinformed. Maybe it's just you're.
I took these from scales. I went all the way from the process of having just scales and blood samples, and I made this tree with them.
Did you take the scales from these snakes and analyze the DNA? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes.
Did you break a scale off the snake and analyze the chromosomes or the DNA? Is that how you made this chart? I think I lost him. Adam, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Okay. So if I think I could analyze Microsoft PowerPoint and Microsoft Word and find they have 98% lines that are similar. Okay. That doesn't prove they both came from Morse code. It proves somebody wrote those codes. The same designer wrote the code, and he probably reused some of the same information for snake eyes that are used in monkey eyes or human eyes, because we have 2 eyes, binocular vision, and eyes are complicated. So the same designer used the same pattern over and over because it works. It works great to live in this world. Just like most of the Hondas have 4 tires on them that are round and they're soft and they bounce over bumps. They probably all have a suspension system. That's not proof of a common ancestor. It's proof of a common designer. The purpose of this debate was to demonstrate, does the evidence show common design or common designer or common ancestry? This is lines on paper, Adam. I'm sorry you wasted your time and probably a lot of trees somebody cut down to make the paper you printed it on. But they are just simply lines on paper. You don't know that those are related to anything because they have similar DNA or similar gene code.
Well, in that case, you're free to contact my university where I did this project and say that I'd simply just drawn lines on paper and see if you can get my degree revoked. You mentioned earlier dogs produce only dogs. So what species of dogs do you include in that?
Well, I don't know. I would guess that dog, wolf, coyote are probably related to a common ancestor, and maybe even wolf might have come from the same kind. I would just be taking a guess, but I would guess there were 8,000 original created kinds of animals.
Mm-hmm.
Today there are 339 recognized breeds of dogs by the American Kennel Association. And counting all the other varieties in the world, there may be as many as 500 varieties that anybody 5 and over would put in the dog category. That does not prove, the fact that we have these 500 varieties of dogs does not prove dogs are related to watermelons, which is what your religion teaches.
You mentioned when we were looking at my phylogenetic tree that you cut the lines off before the species. So you don't think that species, you included wolves, coyotes, your domestic dogs in what you just said. Was there ever a point where a coyote was not a coyote?
I don't think there's ever a point where a coyote would not be in the dog family. And I don't know that our current classifications, like lineage, kingdom, phylum, family, King Philip came over for Girl Scouts, class, order, family, genus, species. I'm not sure that our classification system matches God's original design in any features. But if I had to guess, I would put it somewhere around the family level.
But was a coyote ever a non-coyote?
Probably the dog kind diversified, where the coyote is more specialized and recognizable as a coyote, but anybody would still put it in the dog category.
So it wasn't always a coyote?
Well, is a mini in the car category or the motorcycle category? Car. Okay. Now, is the fact that some creationists cannot always tell you exactly where the kind border is does not prove it didn't happen, and it sure doesn't prove watermelons and dogs are related. Do you believe watermelons and coyotes are related? Adam, if you were to draw lines on paper like you did for this one, with all the animals and all the plants in the world, would they all go back to one common ancestor? Would you have a line on paper connecting a watermelon and a dog?
Well, if you look at phylogenetic studies, everything is related to some degree, and it always seems to match up with morphology. Eventually, very long ago, you'd have the common ancestor of your dogs and your watermelon plants, yes.
So, okay, just so the audience understands, you believe dogs are related to watermelons if you go back far enough in time. I would like to point out for the court, Your Honor, first of all, we cannot go back in time. Secondly, watermelons always produce watermelons. Always produce dogs. There are no examples, none, that can be used as evidence to say anything other than that. So what you've just demonstrated is your religion. You believe very strongly. You believe dogs are related, but that is not science. It's not even common sense. But you would draw lines on paper connecting a dog and a watermelon. I don't trust your lines on paper connecting the snakes either. Yes, you need to get your money back for your degree.
You said dogs only produce dogs. I'd like to compare that to, say if we, hypothetically, we went back to the times of when you've got your Sarcopterygians. I'm sure you're familiar with Sarcopterygians. And you said to me, okay, there's a Sarcopterygian. A Sarcopterygian only ever produces a Sarcopterygian. And I'd say, yeah, you're right. Pretty fair. Zoom back to modern times, and we've got Sarcopterygians that are humans, giraffes, monkeys, and yet they're still Sarcopterygians. Let's zoom forward a few million years or so, and you've said dogs only produce dogs, and then you've got this subset of dogs that are vastly different. You've got this set of dogs that are vastly different. It's the same thing. It's like saying Sarcopterygians will only ever produce Sarcopterygians. Yes, that's true, and they have, but they've got human Sarcopterygians. You got giraffes, monkeys, all your vertebrates. It's nonsense.
Yeah, I agree. What you just said is nonsense. We can't zoom back or zoom forward, and we don't ever observe this. And you don't know that any animal has produced something other than its kind. I would say if we could go back in time to the creation, we would see animals walking around that everybody would recognize. That's the dog kind. Now, it might have produced a variety of dogs with great diversity, from the Chihuahua to the Great Dane. A, they're still dog. B, most of them would not survive in the wild. Most of them, you have to babysit them to keep them alive. Most of the farmers have spent thousands of years developing crops or animals that are specialized to their particular location. There are plants that grow in drier climate and plants that grow in wetter climate. You can get tomatoes for dry climate and tomatoes for wet climate. You can get tomatoes for high elevation, tomatoes for low elevation. They're still tomato, and they're unlikely to survive in the wild. They would revert back to the native original tomato, but they would never change to something non-tomato. You imagine, SpongeBob style, that the dog and the watermelon are related. I feel sorry for you that they taught you that in school, but it's not true. Adam, God created the kinds. God is going to be the judge one day, and you're not going to be able to stand before him and say, well, I looked at the evidence and it convinced me that watermelons and dogs are related. They're going to laugh at you Judgment Day, Adam. You might want to get ready for that.
Gentlemen, we have just over 1 minute left, about a minute and 10 seconds.
So I was going to finish with this one here. The blind snakes I'd like to leave you with. It's effectively blind, but it still has the eyes of a snake that's been covered over by an opaque scale. It's got vestigial pelvic structures. It's got shared derived characteristics, so it's got things that other snakes don't have. So it's a blind snake with the eyes of a snake that have diminished over time, but it has features that other snakes don't have. So where does this fit in?
Well, again, you're giving examples of losing something. That's not gaining something.
But it is gaining things. It's got different structures to other snakes.
It's not going to turn an amoeba to a whale. You got it all backwards, Adam. Better think about it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, cheers, Ken. I think we're finished there.
Okay, well, with 30 seconds to remaining, all right, we'll just throw that into the question and answer. Okay, so now we have 2-minute closings from each. So, Adam, when you begin speaking, well, let's see, Kent went first. So, Kent, when you begin speaking, 2 minutes.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I think I've proven my point that he does not have any evidence that any of these creatures have a common ancestor. I think he's demonstrated clearly they may have a common designer. And that's what the Bible teaches. God said they will bring forth after their kind. 10 times in the first chapter of the Bible. Plants will bring forth after their kind. Animals bring forth after their kind. Birds bring forth after their kind. There are no scientifically observable exceptions to what God said so simply in Genesis chapter 1. Then God told Noah to bring them onto the ark after their kind. There's a website called baraminology.com, which is for the Hebrew word baramin, B-A-R-I-M-U-N. Baraminology.com, which means kind. They've done studies trying to calculate how many kinds of animals are there on land with nostrils that breathe air, like the Bible says Noah had to take, Genesis 7. And the estimate is somewhere between 5,000 and 8,000 kinds of animals had to be on Noah's ark. Since then, there has been great diversity. There are 8 varieties of bears in the world. They might have had a common ancestor called a bear. That doesn't prove bears are related to watermelons. There are, I think, now 1,000 varieties of apples that have been developed for different climates, different textures, different taste. They're still apple. They will always be apple. Some may not survive in some climates. There are no examples at all for Adam's religion, and it is a religion that he believes watermelons and dogs are related. There are no scientific examples. What he's doing is asking everybody to teach his religion at taxpayer expense and pass it off as science. It's not science, Adam. Sorry. Watch my video series number 4 for more on that, drdino.com.
You have 30 seconds left, Kent, if you want it.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that's what bothers me is that people like Adam and others who really strongly believe in evolution, I don't question. He probably really, really believes this. He might really believe these lines he drew on paper. He probably really does. But that doesn't make it science. And they want to force this off on all the other kids to learn. And it's just not common sense. It's not fair. They're certainly not going to give them any moral foundation for life. If your theory is true and we all came from an amoeba, how do we determine right from wrong on any topic? Is murder right or wrong? Is premarital sex right or wrong? Is sex with your dog right or wrong? Is anything right or wrong? And if you think something is wrong, how on earth are you measuring this with your religion of evolution?
Okay, that's time. So, Adam, I actually got this backwards. Sorry about that, folks. Adam went first, but I guess it's no biggie because nobody's going to forget your closing statement. I don't think. Adam, you have 2 minutes when you begin speaking, sir.
It's no problem at all. Cheers, Neff, and thank you, Kent, as well. It got slightly heated at times, but I think, I'm not here to make enemies. I'm here to make friends, and it's been a pleasure talking to you. Just a couple of things. We were talking about the blind snakes, and I said that it had lost the use of its eyes to a substantial degree, and that it had different features. It had gained different features from other snakes, but you said that they'd just lost things, which was, but that's by the wayside now. I think it's quite telling how he said that I've just drawn lines on paper when it came to the phylogenetic tree, which, being that I've done it, I know for a fact that that's not true. I spent a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of stressful moments analysing that DNA to come up with this phylogenetic tree, which it went exactly as I predicted it would. So it landed on my predictions. You said that there'd be roughly 8,000 animals. If there were 4 or more types of cobra, like you seem to suggest, that doesn't seem to make sense. And I want to finish on, you seem to argue a lot from common sense. You're saying, oh, you think a dog and a watermelon related, that sounds ridiculous, therefore it didn't happen. Well, go back 1,000 or 2,000 years and stand in what is modern day London and say to the people in the area, I'm going to travel west, and I'm going to keep traveling west until I come back to London. People would have said you're insane. But you know what? It may not be common sense. It certainly wasn't at that time, but it was true. And put it this way, if we just followed common sense all the time, science wouldn't exist. There'd be no need for it. Thank you.
All right, now we'll have a closing question and answer session. I think Standing for Truth wants to jump in on this. He's got some questions already loaded, I think.
Yep. It looks like we're just at the hour mark, so I took one question for each debater. It was a very lively debate. Thanks so much, gentlemen. I'll start with Adam's question, and then we'll go with Dr. Hovind's question, and we'll call it a day. So Adam, the question for you would be, what is your best example of a beneficial mutation that is not deleterious and actually adds new information to the genome? Go ahead, Adam.
The mutation that caused the spitting in cobras. I think that's quite a beneficial mutation. It occurred 3 times and developed 3 times in 3 different ways. That seems beneficial to me.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'll go to Dr. Hovind then. Your question that I have here is, how do you explain shared genetic mistakes between various species? For example, the vitamin C gulo pseudogene found in apes and humans. Go ahead, Dr. Hovind.
Well, first, I don't know that we can say it's a genetic mistake. We may have to live in the same environment as some of these other animals. I think we do. We all live on planet Earth. So there may be things that happen, catastrophes that happen that cause a genetic a loss of information, like, for instance, the ability to process or to create vitamin C. Some animals have actually the ability to create their own. It appears from the current research anyway, I don't think we know everything about it yet, but it appears that man has lost this ability from a genetic a change that's in a negative direction. Of the millions of genes in the human gene code, the fact that there's a few broken ones is not surprising, any more than making a copy off of a copy off of a copy off of a copy of any computer program is probably going to introduce some loss of information. Never going to put a gain information in there. So losing the ability to process vitamin C that some animals seem to have is not an example for evolution. And the fact that many creatures may have lost this, if apes have lost it and humans have lost it, does that prove we're related? How on earth could that prove any relationship? Could it be something that got into because of climate changes, temperature changes after Noah's flood? I don't know. Could it be that when there were only 2 apes on the ark, they lost it, or one of them lost it and lost it then? But apes are still producing apes. This vitamin C question is not evidence that humans are related to watermelons. But that's what they make incapable of considering anything outside the box. That if there are mistakes in the gene code, I don't think there are. We are a copy off of a copy off a copy off a copy of Adam, so the fact that we can still talk at all is amazing. But no, the vitamin C thing is, I think, another example of design. The original must have been really incredible if the 20,000th generation is still capable of functioning at all. I think that's amazing.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate your answers, both of you gentlemen. I've plugged in both your the links to your channels, Dr. Hovind, Ken Hovind Official, and you as well, Adam. So whoever's listening, if you guys enjoyed, you want to know more about the debaters, please go take a look at their channels, subscribe. But I want to thank you guys for giving us your time today and joining us for this very lively debate.
Well, thank you for having me. Do it again anytime.
Been a
Awesome.
pleasure.
Okay, guys, have a great day.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.